Are learning today. We're learning first Shiur for Elul, 5777. So we're going to have to take a look at the events that have occurred and the parshiot that we have read over the last couple weeks, and how, as the Lubavitch Rebbe used to say, the Friedrich Rebbe used to say, I'm reading the newspaper. What was he doing? He was being Maver Sedra. He was going over the Aliyah that was special for that day, Monday, Sheni, Tuesday, Shlishi. He says if you want to get real news and not fake news, we only have to look into the Parsha. So if we want to understand and interpret the events that have been swirling about since the onset of Elul, and this is my first Shiur back for Elul, we're going to take a look at three primary events that have happened or are happening in the context of Parshat Shavua, and also in the context of preparing for Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so first we'll say that we're learning Lalias Nishmas Shalom ben Sarah Rivka. Rabbi Shalom brought, who was a very, very special man, had a yeshiva in Achlaot, and was a Talmud Muvak of Shlomo Karbach, and spread a lot of his good warmth and teaching and love of Torah and Avos Yisrael. I knew him personally. And we also going to Yibadol L'chaim. We're going to learn for Shlema for Nomi Malka Bas Hoshana Leah, and she is going through. She needs her for Shlema, and also and also Rabbi Lubling, Aaron Yitzchak ben Chana Perel. That's so interesting. My mother-in-law's name is Perel, and my wife's name is Chana. Interesting. So anyway, everybody in this list of everybody, all Chol Yisrael, should have a Fush Shlema. Okay, so let's begin. There are three primary events that have happened in the last 3 weeks. And can only understand them through the lens of Chazal, as we said earlier, and through the Mefarshei HaTorah of the later generations. Number one was the great American eclipse that took place on Chaf Tes Elul, Chaf Tes Av, Erev, Rosh Chodesh Elul. That was the prelude to Elul that took place in America. It began in the upper Pacific Northwest, right? And then made its way down towards the south. I think one of the best places to see it was somewhere in Kentucky or something like that. And in any case, it was an event that captured literally the attention of the world and many, many thousands of people. I can tell you, I traveled was traveling in summer, and I was at B&H Photographs, right?
What?
B&H, which is where you go for anything to do with cameras and equipment and recorders. It's a Hasidische business. They employ Hasidische guys. And there was a massive display. All of those photographers, amateur, professional, who were hunting down the eclipse could get their special equipment that they could photograph the eclipse. Big, a whole manual, a whole choveret. It was a special thing. I actually was zocheh to get something there, and I walked out the door, and I had an experience that was a memorable one. I saw 10 Hasidim standing on the street, and it was late, so I said, let's daven mincha. Corner of 7th and 34th, I mean, whatever, 9th, 10th. And they said, no, don't worry. There's a bus coming to take us back to Borough Park. So we daven on the bus. So I had to decide whether I wanted to make it halfway down to Borough Park to chap mincha. So I said, listen, got to daven mincha. So I got on the bus, and they all were so worried about how I'm going to get back to Penn Station to catch a bus back. That was so nice. And I ended up getting off by the new World Trade Center. So I said, boy, there's a lot of, I'm going from the Eclipse to the World Trade Center, all sorts of massive events, and let's what is Hashem telling us? Okay.
Is this your article that you wrote?
Yes, I wrote an article about it.
Read it.
Oh, really?
Really, of course.
Oh, that was in Five Towns Jewish Times?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How do you get those articles?
Oh, it's very easy. You go to F5, which is the numeral 5, TJT.com, fivetownsjewishtimes.com, and in the little magnifying glass, you just put my name, J. Yaacov Schwartz, and you will see articles. It'll come up. So I wanted to go over some of the nekudot from that because I think it was very important. Number one, the eclipse itself took place at a very unusual time. It was between the period of two. It was the end of the month of Av, the last part of Av. In other words, Tu B'Av was a prelude to it, but it was prior to Elul. Now that day, Chaf Tes Av, is very, very significant in the history of Klal Yisrael. What happened on that day? If that did not happen, there would actually be no Klal Yisrael. We can thank the events of Chaf Tes Av for saving the history of Klal Yisrael. What had happened? Because if you recall, on Shavuos, Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu, right, the Torah and Klal Yisrael, and then Moshe goes up for a period of 40 days to receive the Luchos, which takes us till Shivasar Be Tammuz. And then Moshe was told by Hashem, Raid Kishiches Amcha. Klal Yisrael has gone off the derech, whether it's Klal Yisrael, the Erev Rav, or Klal Yisrael not correcting the Erev Rav, many, many different interpretations, but there is a collective guilt, even by Aaron HaKohen, to some extent, and the Meforshim, you have to look at the Meforshim to understand it exactly, but the Cheder Egel took place then, and Moshe Rabbeinu became aware of it, and went down, and the first original Luchos were smashed. That was an event of Shavas B'Tammuz, correct? Subsequently, Moshe makes them drink the gold dust of the grounded up egel in order to test them who was involved in the chet. 3,000 people are implicated, and the Levium exterminate all those who were involved in the chet. And then Moshe says, I'm going to try to fix this thing. And he goes up back to Shemayim for a period of 40 days to daven to Hashem, to forgive the Jewish people, because what did Hashem say to Moshe Rabbeinu? He said, I'm willing to destroy Klal Yisrael and make Klal Yisrael through you. And what does Moshe Rabbeinu say to that? Mecheni na misifrecha. Now the word mecheni also has to do with the next event that happened, which is the flood. Vayimach es kol hayakum. It was the threat of literally being disintegrated. Okay, anyway, so Moshe Rabbeinu is going up to Shemayim to daven to Hashem that Klal Yisrael not be disintegrated. And where do we get the news that we were forgiven? Where Moshe is told, Salachti kidvarecha, on the 29th day of Av. Therefore, it is a unique day. And then Moshe Rabbeinu then goes up for another 40 days. For what? And he comes back with the Torah, the second Luchos, right, on Yom Kippur. So that frames this time period. So actually the period from Chaf Tes, not Rosh Chodesh Elul, but from Chaf Tes Av through Yom Kippur is the actual great 40 days where Hashem forgives Klal Yisrael and allows us to do tshuva. The only question that I have, maybe I'll pose to you, is why do we need 2 times 40 days? In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu went up on the 17th of Tammuz. On the 29th of Av, he got the word that Salachti Kidvarecha. Then Rosh Chodesh Av could have been Rosh Hashanah, right? Let's get the Torah. Or it could have been Yom Kippur. Let's get the Torah then. Why do we have to wait another 40 days? Anybody think about it? What's that? But he did already correct the first 40. Okay, so you want to say there's another dimension of Torah he received? Very, it could be. Yes, could be.
Could it be that things would change because of what Klal Yisrael did? So Hashem had to give him something slightly different?
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting theory. A theory that would need a lot of exploration. Yeah. Was it a step down form of Torah? Very, very difficult to say that 100% because we don't know that the Torah is that changeable, but it is possible that it might have been refracted through a different lens. It's something worth thinking about. I thought you could offer a very simple suggestion. There are 2 types of tshuva. There's tshuva mi yira and tshuva mi ahava. And the first was clearly tshuva mi yira because Hashem threatened their extermination. So when someone is being faced with life or death situation, that's called tshuva mi yira. And then Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't content with that because he didn't want Klal Yisrael to receive the Torah in a situation where they're just happy that they're alive, but to rather reconnect with Hashem in the way that they had been before, like a choson and a kala. That requires ahava. That's what's going on Shavuos, right? By Yom Klois Moshe. Moshe finished the Mishkan, right? It was a day of a shidduch, right? It reminds us of Matan Torah, which was also Hashem was the groom, as it were. Klal Yisrael is the kala, and that's a very, very, very important point for understanding, particularly this week's Parsha Kisavo and the mitzvah of Bikurim, which centers around the concept of Simcha. But I want to go into chronological order, so I'm just bookmarking that with you. Simcha requires, the ultimate Simcha is Kisamechecha Yitzircha Began Eden Mikedem. Past couple weeks we've been reading Shoftim, Kiseitse, Kisavo. We have a lot of mitzvahs there that have to do with Simcha. What's another mitzvah of Simcha that is imperative on the individual person, on an individual, not collectively on Klal Yisrael, but an individual? That's definitely true. But which specific mitzvah in the parshas that we had recently are because he's Naki Yelebeso, we just read, that the fighter who goes to war, Kiseitse, teaches us, he's got to be Naki Yelebeso, V'simach es ishto asher lakach. So the concept of Simcha is linked first and foremost to marriage. That's because we're very relieved when we marry off our children. And we're even more relieved if we can pay for it. So you're really happy. Ein kol simcha ka'ataras hachovos. No, I'm only kidding. Ka'ataras ha'sveikos.
Simcha together.
Right, year and simcha together. So, but simcha, the paradigm of simcha is v'simach es ishto asher lakach. The word simcha, by the way, is very close to the word samach, with a samach, right? Which means support. So when a person is all alone, right? Lo tov lios adam levado. A person needs a little someone to support them and to work with them, right? And therefore, the word simcha is you'll see generally in Tanakh, means when a person is happy because they feel a connection to either someone else or to Hashem.
Shin and samach interchangeable?
According to Rav Hirsch's way of darshaning, it's a phonetic drash. Yeah, but there's an idea for some phonetic drash. Don't hold me to the diktuk, people. But there certainly is a concept, a phonetic. What do they call those homonyms? When something sounds the same but is a different meaning. Okay, so we'll get back to Simcha. First event, Chaf Tes, of the day that Hashem says, Salachti kidvarecha. Now, why would the solar eclipse, right, be of significance related to that day in the Jewish calendar? But it's not only related to that day. The time period is the time period between that Tu B'Av and Rosh Hashanah, or Chaf Tes Av till Yom Kippur. It's all one time period of Slicha, Mechila, Kapara. So what happened on Tu B'Av? There were several events that happened in Tu B'Av, one of which, or maybe all of which, directly relate to the concept of maybe what happened in the solar eclipse. How is that? Because the Gemara tells us at the end of Tainus several things that happened on that day. Who remembers what happened on the 15th above? It says, Lo hayu yomim tamim Yisroel ke yom haKippurim v'chamisha asar b'av. Now you see the connection between those 2 days. And this is a chiddush. You heard it here first. Maybe I heard it here first too. The 15th of Av, till Yom Kippur, is that period of divine favor. One marks the onset of it, and one marks the culmination of it. And what do you do during those 2 periods of time? What did they do? Klal Yisrael do according to the Gemara and Tainus.
Stop dying.
That's one of the things. But they used to make shidduchim. The Mishnah tells us at the end of Tainus, all the girls used to go out, and the various ones used to sing various words to attract the proper spouse. You didn't have a dating crisis back then. They took care of it. You either got engaged on on 15th of Av. If you didn't make it the first round, they got you by Yom Kippur, and by Sukkot, everybody's engaged. Now you understand why it's one time period in which the beginning day and the last day are both the beginning and culmination of a period of marriage, because Hashem is remarrying Klal Yisrael, which means that we are renewed as the Am Segula. If we're doing Cheder Egel and we're doing Avodah Zarah, we're no longer the Am Segula. We're just like any other nation from the 70 nations who worship the sun, moon, and stars. Sun. The primary Avodah Zarah of the world, which is the anti-Am Segula, right, is sun worship. In fact, they said that Paro, they worship the Nile and Paro himself, but they say in Egypt the biggest Avodah Zarah was Ra, the sun god. Notice, Ra. Ra. No accidents, right? So, and always in the language of Chazal, whenever they want to talk about Avodah Zarah, they speak about people who worship the Chama, the Levana, the Mazolos v'Kochavim. It's a Mishnah of Avodah Zarah, where the elders of Rome challenged the Jews and said, hey, if Hashem, your God, you're telling us hates Avodah Zarah so much that we do all over here in Rome, then why doesn't he come and whack us all? Why doesn't he kill them all? So they said, listen, you're worshiping the sun, the moon, the stars, and the constellations. Ya'abed aloma mibnei ashotim. Should I destroy my world for these foolish people? I can't do that. So they said to him, okay, so let him destroy the unimportant ones. This little god over here, that little god over there. And they said, no, that'll only reinforce things. Teida shehen elokos. That's going to prove that they are Avodah Zarah. In fact, they said it this way. They said, Af anu mechazki yedeim shalelu. If we would pray to God, and Hashem would listen to us, the Zakanim, Hashem should listen to them, and He would come and be mevatel those little Avodah Zarahs, the minor Avodah Zarahs, then the big Avodah Zarah people will say, you see, the big Avodah Zarah came and wiped out the little Avodah Zarah, right? And that's what's going on, consolidation of power. And that's how they cleverly answered the Zakanim of Rome. Of course, there are more profound answers, but that's the Zakanim. So we see that the sun is the representation of the primary mistake. There are three primary mistakes that man has made since the Nachash got a hold of us. And that is Gili Araya, Shvichas Damim, and Avodah Zarah. Three primary sins. The first is, Avodah Zarah, serving nature as opposed to God, thinking that nature has a reality, or that we have a reality independent of Hashem, which we don't, right? Boni matem Hashem elkeichem, we're a son to God, meaning that we have a close love relationship with Hashem, not a physical son, but a loving relationship, like a father and a son, Avinu Malkeinu, but also our king, and like Ish v'Ishto, right? We're like the Isha, we're like the support mechanism for Hashem. We get Hashem's name out in the world. We're a marketing team. Did you know what the mitzvah V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha means? Among other things, it means to cause Hashem's name to be loved by all people. Like Avram did. He would schlep people into his tent and feed them and say, who do you think brought you this food? And they would make a bracha to Hashem. He was a one-man PR team running around the world to tell everybody about this great news that we have this wonderful Bashefer that takes care of us. That was Avram, and he says, and if you don't love somebody, if you love somebody, you're running around and singing their praises all over. Which is why when you bring your Bikurim, one of the things you have to do is say Hallel. And not a special Shira. And you know what that Shira is? I used to sing this song when I was a kid. Aromimcha Hashem kidilisani, right? Remember that song? Aromimcha Hashem kidilisani. Miami Boys, Pirchei or something, way back when. Ki simachta oivai li. Right? That you protected me. Right? I was delisani, I was in a bad way. Right? And Aramimcha Hashem, lift me up. Show me that I'm different than the others, that we have a special relationship. Okay. So, if the sun is representing Avodah Zarah, what does the moon represent? Although moon was part of that list, but the moon has a special kesher to which nation? Am Yisrael. What do we say during Kiddush Levana? What was the first mitzvah the Jews got in Mitzrayim? HaKodesh said Lachem, which is to calculate the new moon, and then afterwards intercalculate it with the solar year, because we have Chag HaAviv and all that, but essentially, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim, Klal Yisrael Nimshol Levana. What does that mean? Just as the moon has nothing of its own. The great is the sun. The moon has nothing. We, Klal Yisrael, no, we are nothing. We're just merely a reflection of Hashem's wonderful light to the world. That's what we are. We don't have our own light. If the moon starts getting haughty and says, I'm the boss, which is what the moon did originally, he gets cut down to size. But guess what? In the end of days, we are told, this is interesting, that, I hope before was interesting too, that the Chama and Levana even out. Now everybody thinks that means that the moon is going to start shining, like the sun, could very well be. But perhaps we could suggest the moon has the power to overcome the sun. Like it did in Eclipse. So when you say that the moon is as powerful as the sun, it means that the moon can block out the sun and overcome the sun. Which is, first of all, the whole thing doesn't make sense because the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun. And how do they line up perfectly and it's a perfect circle? How did that happen? And the precise timing, and okay, it does happen often enough that Hashem reminds us, or reminds Klal Yisrael about it, but this was the first time in close to 100 years, I believe. Last time was 1918. That was a very important time for the world. It's the beginning of World War I, and it was really, really, really Hashem preparing the world for the return of the Jewish people, where? To Eretz Yisrael. Because it was the same date, and you heard it here, as the Balfour Declaration. Same year. So it was if, and again, this is my thing, that Hashem was announcing to the world, watch out, here comes Am Yisrael. They're starting to become powerful once again by being reunited with their land. And in fact, the Rechaim HaKadosh and other Mefarshim say that there is no bringing of Bikurim, and that's a simple halacha, unless there's a Beis HaMikdash and the Jewish people are in their land. And not only in their land, but the halacha is when they conquer the land. Because if you're in the land, but you haven't really established the rule of Hashem in the land, there's still plenty of Ovdei Avodah Zarah and Amalek and who knows who in the land, then the real simcha isn't there. It's kind of like being married and living with your in-laws. I'm only kidding. Chas v'shalom.
So what is this latest?
I love my in-laws. They're tzaddikim.
What is the latest?
It's a marriage, but it's kind of platonic. It's not really romantic. Yeah.
What does the latest eclipse mean then?
Oh, so now.
Asked you about the date. I didn't hear which date. It was
29th of the month. Oh, 1918.
That was the end of it.
That was the last great American solar eclipse. Was 1918. 1918, which was Right, but it was simultaneous with the Balfour Declaration. I said the events of the First World War set the stage for the Balfour, because it's one of the crazy things. The World War was focused in Germany and France, primarily, right? And along those lines. But the English went, and the Ottomans, for some reason, entered the war. They're not even close by. That opened up another battlefront, and the British ended up defeating the Turks and taking away Eretz Yisrael, which is like very random when you think about it. That wasn't the epicenter of the war. It had to do with the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and the Habsburgs, and the Germans got against. What does it have to do with the Ottoman Empire? It was Hashem's turning the world around and giving Eretz Yisrael to the Christians, led by England, away from the Muslims, because Edom is called Dome L'Chazir, to the pig, which means Lahachzir. He's the one that's going to return Eretz Yisrael to us, which is what they did. At least partially. Very partially, by the way, yeah.
This eclipse happened almost just before Rosh Chodesh, right?
The day of Erev Rosh Chodesh.
So the moon would be just a tiny little sliver above him, right?
The moon will be invisible, actually.
And the fact that it actually was completely round and managed to cover the sun in its entirety, I mean, we would have thought it was a sliver above.
Yeah, well, and by the way, it can only happen on Rosh Chodesh when the moon is invisible. That's why I saw they passed around a rabbinic question, or rabbi's riddle. Why do you never say Rosh Chodesh never say Tachanun on the day of a solar eclipse? Never say Tachanun. What's a Yontif? Yeah, it's always Erev Rosh Chodesh. It can only happen Erev Rosh Chodesh because that's when the moon is positioned to eclipse the sun. Okay. So, therefore, let's look at just a drop deeper at what the sun-moon relationship is for Klal Yisrael. The Gemara in Tainus tells us one of the things that happened on Tu B'Av, it was a day of reconciliation of the Jewish people. The marriages, the engagements, the fact that the Jewish people of the north were allowed by Hoshea ben Elah to return to the Beis HaMikdash. It was a return of the unity of Am Yisrael. And if Am Yisrael is not unified, how can they unify with Hashem? If you're split within yourself, how can you join with another? And Klal Yisrael reunited. And Shevet Binyamin came back, because that was important. Binyamin is actually the tribe on whose territory the Beis HaMikdash will rest. And they were nearly eradicated, as we know, in the story of Pilegesh Begiva, where there was unusual, horrific behavior that outraged all of the Jewish people, and they wanted to destroy them. And they almost did destroy them until the last 400 were allowed to come in. Notice 400. 400 is significant. 400 is the size of the moon, bigger than the sun, and it's also the amount of men that Esav brought to attack Yaakov. Okay? Those 400 men were not an insignificant thing. They represent a certain koach of destruction towards Am Yisrael that we have to be wary of. It's a spiritual force. Okay? So it's interesting that we almost lost Binyamin to bloodshed, which is the tool of Edom, the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, hatred, and also who would have caused both the heinous crime of Pilegesh Begivra and also the militaristic response. It's all from the Yetzer Hara. And therefore, when we get Binyamin back, it's a massive celebration.
When is this?
Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av was the day of the reunification. It's all about marriage. It's all about marriage. And you know what? The people of Binyamin had nobody to marry, so they let them come and capture themselves brides. Like in some countries still today, they come with a sack of potatoes and they just run after a woman and put her in the sack and take her home.
Sounds beautiful.
What?
Yeah, where's the Shiur Chachas?
Well, I guess you could run fast or slow. It's along those lines. But also, they want to get caught. Some of them want to get caught, and it's kind of dashing and romantic that Prince Valiant will swoop you up on his horse. Maybe.
No.
All right. Not going to go over big in shidduch circles. But that's what happened. And the Bnei Binyamin were able to remarry and rebuild their tribe and restore the integrity of Klal Yisrael, which is very, very important because there is no Shechina unless Klal Yisrael is B'Shleimus, Yaakov Avinu's 12 tribes, Shiftei Ka. If they don't exist, then there is no Beis HaMikdash, because the Beis HaMikdash is in the Chelek of Binyamin. That's why, as we learned, Binyamin is the centerpiece of the conflict of the 12 tribes, essentially Yosef for Yehuda, and when they reconcile and Binyamin is with us, then good things can happen. But there is a final thing that happened on Tu B'Av, and that is a strange Gemara, a very strange Gemara. The Gemara says that there was the yontif of finishing to cut the wood for the Beis HaMikdash. Because Why? The Gemara says like this. Rabbi of Yosef. Oh, by the way, of course, it was when the enemies of the Bar Kochba revolt was brutally put down, and when the Jewish soldiers were killed, as Tosas explains here, the bodies were heaped around a vineyard by the Roman general. He used them for a fence. Can you imagine? It's like a Nazi thing to use their bodies for some personal use. But it's also very symbolic because the Kerem represented, the Gan Eden, right? That where we want to be, our Gan, which is Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash. And the Romans were saying, we'll destroy you. You think to go there, we will destroy you. And what happened? A miracle. It says that the bodies did not decompose, even though they were laying there for quite a long time, years. The bodies did not decompose. They were like righteous tzaddikim whose bodies do not decompose, and they were finally brought to burial on Tu B'Av. And what happened there was that the Klal Yisrael recaptured its belief in Mashiach, because it was so crushed by the Bar Kochba revolt. What hope do they have for the future? And Hashem sparked their hope that there would be a Mashiach again by showing that the soldiers Ki'ilu were still alive. Soldiers still alive. Okay, now, but that was also, says Rabbi Yosef, Yom Shepasku Milichros Eitzim L'Ma'aracha. They stopped cutting wood for the Mizbeach of the Beis Hamikdash, is the Gemara Tainis Lamed Aleph. Because, why? Because it says as follows. It was a yontif. It was a yontif. Well, that's what it says later. It's a yontif. Rabbi Elazar Agadol Omer, Michamisha Asar Ba'av ve'elech tashash kocho shel chama v'lo hayu korsim eitzim la'maracha lefi she'enon yeveshin. You can't dry out the wood. You need a lot of sunshine to dry out the wood, and the days are getting shorter, as we know. Lich benching gets creeping earlier and earlier. You need like all the sunlight hours you can get, because at night, the moisture, they can start to attract worms. So if there's long nights, you got a problem. That's what he says. But then comes along Rav Menashe and adds this. V'karule yom tavar magal. It's called the day of the breaking of the axe. Mikan ve'elech de mosif yasif udelo mosif my ya'asef. He says, now that the nights are getting longer, you better start learning. And if you don't, you're in trouble. Ya'asef, chas v'shalom, right? They'll gather you up, meaning to Shemayim. You want life? You got to show that you're interested in Torah. We're coming now, a critical period between Tu B'Av and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. If you don't add to your learning, the nights are not an excuse not to learn. Adarabah, it's considered an ideal time to learn. You have to have learning at night as well. And you got to do it. And if you don't do it, you're endangering yourself. And then says, what's the penalty going to be? Tekabre ime, which means a horrible thing. The chas v'shalom on any Jew that the mother should bury a child. Now, what doesn't fit here is, he says it's the day of the breaking of the axe, and then you got to add learning. What does breaking of the axe have to do with adding learning? What's going on over here? What's the connection? So everybody reads through this Gemara, but if you just stop and read what it says, the breaking of the axe has to do with this. The breaking of the axe has to do with the previous thing. And why do you need a name for the day? Yom Tavar Magal.